9 years. That's how long I gave to Horizon Digital. 9 years of my life, building something from the ground up alongside Walter Maxwell, a man I respected more than my own father. I was there when we landed our first Fortune 500 client. I was the one who developed the AI-driven platform that revolutionized how our clients tracked consumer engagement. I was the reason we were pulling in 8-figure contracts. But none of that mattered in the end. Not to Ethan, anyway. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Jason Mitchell. I was the Chief Innovation Officer at Horizon Digital until 6 months ago. And this is the story of how my brother-in-law's biggest mistake became my greatest opportunity. I met Walter Maxwell when I was fresh out of business school. He saw something in me that others missed. Not just technical skills, but a strategic mind that could anticipate market shifts before they happened. We clicked immediately. He became more than a boss. He became my mentor, my friend, and eventually my father-in-law when I fell deeply in love with his daughter, Victoria. For 9 years, I poured everything into Horizon Digital. While others worked their 40 hours and went home, I was there until midnight, refining algorithms, meeting with clients, developing new products. Walter and I shared a vision to create marketing technology that didn't just collect data, but transformed it into genuine insights that changed how companies connected with consumers. Together, we built Horizon into an industry leader. The crown jewel of our development was Horizon AI, a platform I personally architected that could predict consumer behavior patterns with uncanny accuracy. It was revolutionary, and it was mine. Everything changed the day Walter had his heart attack. It wasn't severe, thankfully, but it was enough to shake everyone at the company. While he recovered, I stepped up. 80-hour weeks became 100-hour weeks. I kept the business running, reassured nervous clients, and maintained our growth trajectory. I even handled a potential scandal involving Walter's son, Ethan, who had misappropriated company resources for a side project. I smoothed it over, kept it quiet, protected the family name. Why wouldn't I? They were my family too. When Walter announced he was stepping down as CEO, I assumed, well, it doesn't matter what I assumed. What happened was that he named Ethan as his successor. Ethan, who had worked at the company for just 3 years. Ethan, who spent more time networking at industry parties than understanding our core business. Ethan, who I had personally bailed out of trouble more than once. But Walter believed in family legacy, and Ethan was his only son. I smiled during the announcement, shook Ethan's hand, and publicly pledged my support. What else could I do? The warning signs appeared almost immediately. Within weeks, Ethan began replacing experienced team members with friends from his MBA program. He excluded me from critical strategy meetings. He began dismantling processes I had carefully built, claiming they were outdated, when in reality, they were the backbone of our success. But the most painful part was how it affected family dynamics. Sunday dinners at Walter's became tense affairs. Ethan would avoid eye contact with me, speaking only to Victoria. My wife was caught in the middle, torn between loyalty to her husband and her brother. I could see it wearing on her, this newfound tension between the men she loved most. Then came that Tuesday morning. My calendar showed a 9 a.m. meeting with Ethan, but no agenda. When I walked into his office, his assistant closed the door behind me. There was no HR representative present, which should have been my first clue. Ethan didn't stand when I entered. He didn't even look up from his computer for a full 30 seconds. "We're restructuring the executive team," he finally said, still not meeting my eyes. "The board and I feel the company needs fresh perspectives. People who understand modern marketing, not just relationships." I stood there, stunned into silence. 9 years. 9 years of my life. And he was dismissing me like an underperforming intern. "Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately," he continued, finally looking at me with cold detachment. "Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings." I knew what he expected, an outburst, pleading, anger. Something he could use to justify his decision, to tell others I was unstable or difficult. Instead, I simply nodded, thanked him for the opportunity, and walked out with my dignity intact. But inside? Inside I was burning. I sat in my car in the parking garage for nearly an hour, staring at my company ID card, trying to process what had just happened. The betrayal cut deep. Not just professionally, but personally. This was family. This was someone I had protected, someone whose father had trusted me implicitly. And he had discarded me without a second thought. Have you ever experienced that sudden, sickening realization that someone you trusted completely has been plotting against you? That hollow feeling in your chest? Like something vital has been ripped away? If you have, you know exactly what I felt sitting in that parking garage. And if you're still with me in this story, maybe take a moment to hit that like button. Trust me when I say, what happens next changed everything. As I sat there, something nagged at the back of my mind. A conversation with Walter 3 years earlier, after I had helped navigate a crisis that nearly sank the company. He had insisted on revising my contract, adding what he called protection clauses. "You saved us, Jason," he had said. "I want to make sure you're protected if anything ever happens." I reached into my glove compartment and pulled out the document. There it was, Section A7B. In the event of termination without cause, executive shall receive 12 months' salary as severance, immediate vesting of all stock options, system access for 60 days as quote, 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 system access from all non-compete and non-solicitation clauses. Complete exemption. I read it 3 times to be sure. In his haste to get rid of me, Ethan had overlooked the most important detail in my contract. He could fire me, but he couldn't stop me from competing directly against him. He couldn't prevent me from approaching our clients. And most critically, he had just given me 60 days of system access, a window into everything happening at Horizon while I planned my next move. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The hurt transformed into cold, calculated resolve. I didn't want my job back. I wanted to build something better. And I wanted Ethan to understand exactly what he had lost. That evening, my phone rang. Sophia Chen, CEO of Apex Technologies, Horizon's biggest competitor. She had tried to recruit me twice before, offers I had politely declined out of loyalty to Walter. "I heard what happened," she said without preamble. "Are you finally ready to talk?" I felt a smile spread across my face for the first time that day. "I'm not just ready to talk," I replied. "I'm ready to rebuild the industry." When I got home, Victoria was waiting. One look at my face and she knew something was wrong. I told her everything. The dismissal, the contract clause, the call from Sophia. She listened in silence, her expression unreadable. "What will you do?" she finally asked, and I could hear the conflict in her voice. "How do you choose between your husband and your brother?" "I'm going to show your brother exactly what happens when you underestimate someone who knows all your weaknesses," I said quietly. "I won't do anything unethical or illegal. But I am going to compete, and I am going to win." That night was the first time Victoria slept with her back to me. I accepted Sophia's offer the next morning. Chief Strategy Officer at Apex Technologies, with extraordinary autonomy to build a new division from the ground up. My first day, she handed me a blank organizational chart and said, "Build your dream team." I knew exactly who I wanted. I spent the first week identifying Horizon's vulnerabilities, clients who were already dissatisfied, relationships that depended on my personal touch, weaknesses in their product offerings that I understood intimately because I had designed around them. Meanwhile, I logged into Horizon systems using my quote, transition consultant credentials. I didn't sabotage anything that would have been crossing a line, but I observed. I watched as Ethan's leadership created confusion and dysfunction. Missed deadlines, conflicted messaging, growing client frustration. I saw the opportunities emerging like cracks in a foundation. Have you ever watched someone making a critical mistake in slow motion, knowing exactly how it would play out, but they were too arrogant to see it themselves? If you have, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your story about a time when someone's arrogance became their downfall. Within 3 weeks, I had recruited Olivia Rodriguez, Horizon's marketing director, Daniel Kim, their data analytics lead, and Rachel Washington, who handled their international client relations. Each brought invaluable insights and skills. Together, we began developing what would become Insight Engine, a platform that would make Horizon AI look primitive by comparison. The first major client defection happened a month later. Great Brand Corp, a client I had personally secured for Horizon 3 years earlier, signed with Apex after a single presentation. Their CMO didn't even try to hide the reason. We hired Horizon because of you, Jason. We're following the vision, not the logo. More followed. Not a flood, but a steady stream of clients moving their business to Apex. Each departure sent shockwaves through Horizon's stock price. Each press release about our new platform eroded confidence in their leadership. Victoria and I were barely speaking by this point. "You're systematically destroying my brother's career," she said during one particularly tense dinner. "No," I responded calmly. "I'm building something better. Your brother is destroying himself through his own arrogance." I wasn't sure she believed me, but it was the truth. I wasn't acting out of petty revenge. I was creating something I believed in, something that should have been built at Horizon if Ethan hadn't been so determined to dismantle everything I had created. 6 months after my dismissal, Horizon Digital was in crisis. They had lost 28% market share. 3 major executives had resigned in a single week. Their stock had fallen to half its previous value. And then Walter called. He asked me to come to Horizon's headquarters, requested my presence in the boardroom where I had spent thousands of hours strategizing, innovating, building. I agreed, out of respect for him, if nothing else. I walked into that familiar space to find Walter, Ethan, and the entire board of directors waiting. Ethan looked defeated, dark circles under his eyes, his formerly immaculate appearance now disheveled. Walter explained that Ethan was stepping down as CEO. The board had implemented an emergency restructuring plan. And they wanted me back. I looked across the table at Ethan. Our eyes met. And in that moment, something passed between us. A recognition of all that had happened. All that had been lost. If you've ever stood face to face with someone who once betrayed you, only to see them humbled by the consequences of their own actions, you'll understand what I felt in that moment. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was simply the quiet confirmation that consequences eventually find everyone. I was wrong, Ethan finally said, his voice hoarse. I thought leadership was about power and control. I didn't understand it was about vision and trust. He offered a formal apology, acknowledging that his insecurity and desire to prove himself had led to catastrophic decisions. Walter offered me the position of executive chairman, with complete autonomy over strategy and innovation. Any other time in my life, it would have been everything I wanted. But not anymore. Some bridges, once burned, create space for better structures, I told him gently. I appreciate the offer, but I've found where I belong. Back at Apex, my team celebrated securing another major client. As I looked out over the city skyline from my new office, I reflected on my journey, from trusted insider to outsider to industry innovator. What had begun as a response to betrayal had transformed into something more meaningful, the freedom to create without compromise, to build according to my vision rather than someone else's limitations. That evening, Victoria came to my office, our first real conversation in weeks. "Are you happier now?" she asked as she looked around at what I had built. I considered the question carefully. "I lost something I valued, but found something I needed," I answered honestly. Sometimes being pushed out is the universe's way of pushing you forward. 6 months later, Apex Technologies had grown by 40%. Insight Engine had become the industry standard, and Victoria and I were finding our way back to each other, slowly rebuilding the trust that had been damaged in the crossfire. Ethan and I still haven't spoken directly, but we managed to be in the same room at Walter's birthday celebration without tension. Some wounds heal with time. Others simply become part of who you are. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that sometimes your greatest opportunity comes disguised as your worst nightmare. The clause that was meant to protect me became the key that unlocked a future I never would have pursued otherwise. I didn't set out to destroy Ethan. I set out to prove my own worth, to create something meaningful, despite his attempt to erase me. In the process, I discovered strengths I never knew I had. If this story of resilience and strategic thinking resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to rebuild after betrayal? What unexpected opportunities emerged from your greatest challenges? And if you want to hear more stories about finding strength after betrayal, don't forget to subscribe. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do when someone underestimates you is simply to prove them wrong. Not out of vengeance, but out of self-respect. And that's exactly what I did.